All right, it's 10 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, welcome everyone to the annual financial update. My name is Carter Smitherman. I'm the Chief Financial Officer here at Royal Oaks. I try to do these annually, once a year. I normally do it in September, but in September, our auditorium was closed and we were replacing the flooring. So, as you can see, it's all brand new floor. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Number one is we actually have a new T-coil system under the floor, and the T-coil system will actually integrate with your T-coil system in your hearing aids. If you have hearing aids but you don't know if you have your T-coil active or not, next time you see your audiologist, go ahead and just let them know if your T-coil could be activated so you could get the full use of that new technology. Second, as we go through the presentation, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. The only thing I do request is that you wait until Gail or Holly, who are in the back, they'll have microphones. Please wait until you have the microphone before you ask your questions to help everybody hear the question, particularly those that are listening on the television. So thirdly, this is being broadcast over the internal channels. This will be broadcast as well as the second presentation at 2 o'clock. This presentation is also being recorded, and we will upload this and have this presentation available on YouTube for those that may want to share it with friends or whatnot, because maybe they weren't here to be present at the presentation. They just had too many schedule conflicts. So this year, I'm going to be presenting with Chuck Tholen, our Director of Development for the Foundation. And so let's go through the agenda topics real quick. We're going to start off, and I'm going to have Chuck talk about the foundation and what it's been doing. Then I'll go over the results of the prior year financially. We're going to take a brief look ahead at a couple big projects for next year. And then lastly, we'll have a whole Q&A session. But again, if you have a question, even as we go along, please don't be afraid to ask. Okay? So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Chuck, and he can talk about the foundation to get us started.
Thanks, Carter. Welcome, everyone. As Carter said, my name is Chuck Tholen, and I'm the Director of Development for the People of Faith Foundation here at Royal Oaks. And Carter wanted me to take a few minutes before his presentation to kind of talk to you about the foundation. We've got a lot of new people here, plus people tend to forget about it. Kind of think of me as the opening act. You know, when you used to be younger, you would go to a concert, you always had the struggling comic or the band you never heard of before Elvis came back up on stage. So Elvis will be back in a little bit. Anyway, I want to touch on a few things. The foundation is here to support Royal Oaks. That is our primary goal. We have three main objectives. The first one is to provide benevolent care. The second is to enrich the lives of residents and staff. And then the third is to transform the future of health and wellness. Now, the benevolent care, just as a reminder, any Royal Oak resident who has a life care contract and through no fault of their own simply outlives their resources, the foundation comes in and we provide the support for that so that you are never asked to leave Royal Oaks. You have that ability to stay here for life. That creates a huge stress relief for a lot of people, especially the way the markets have been lately. So that's the benevolent care. That's our first objective. The second one is enriching the lives of residents and staff. And I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about some of the projects that the foundation has completed over the past year. The first one, as Carter mentioned, is the hearing loop. That's a brand new project. We hope that it really improves the hearing quality in here in the auditorium. We've done the art in the halls. That is also completed. So you see the new artwork hanging in the halls. There's actually a little second side project going on that's just started right now. We're changing out some artwork in the care center because theirs is a little bit older. Another project was the patient lifts in the care center. That actually benefited both residents and staff. The old lifts were completely worn out. The foundation paid for new lifts. We actually had a couple of staff members injured when the lifts failed. So they got injured. So that benefits them. Employee scholarships also, and then the new vital sign machines in all the higher levels of care. This next shot, just kind of a graphic representation of the things that have been going on. But one thing I didn't mention is this one down here in the lower right corner. That is the Music and Memory Gals, the M&M Girls as they're called. This is a volunteer group that provides a program in Friendship House for our memory care residents, and they connect with the residents and get them engaged through music. Now, why would I put that up there? Well, all of these other projects, people think the foundation has to have these huge thousands of dollars worth of projects. This was a very small project. They came to the foundation and they said, hey, we want to expand this program and we need a new portable audio player to do the music. It was a couple $100. We were like, absolutely, we're doing that. That's not a problem. So these little things can make such an impact on bigger projects. So it doesn't always have to be a big project that we're working on. It's the little stuff that works as well. To transform the Health and Wellness Center, that is the Vita Center. This is under construction right now. I actually pulled this shot off the construction camera a couple days ago. So we are under construction. This will set Royal Oaks apart when it is finished. It will be the flagship of Royal Oaks and will set us apart and keep us a leader of senior care for years to come. We're extremely proud of that, and the foundation is extremely proud that they had a part in getting this jump started and going for Royal Oaks. So we're really pleased with that. How do we get the donations? Well, 95% of our donations come from residents, just like yourself. 95%, over 95% actually. So we rely on the residents to help that out. And in some cases, you're doing that now with the Employee Appreciation Fund. That also goes under the foundation. But these programs are based off of what you have and what you give to the foundation, which is incredibly generous, and we really appreciate all of it. We make it super easy to donate. You knew there was going to be a sales pitch here. I'm a sales guy. You can do cash, check, card, gifts of stock if you want to do that. We can charge it to your monthly statement. You can set it up to make a monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or annually charge on your monthly statement. Really easy. Qualified charitable distribution or charitable gift annuity. Did anybody, just show of hands, did anybody read the foundation focus that I put out on Monday? Okay, there's a great article in there on both the QCDs and the charitable gift annuities. So think about that as you're doing it. And then finally, one that we kind of forget about sometimes is the bequest in a will or trust. You know, Royal Oaks has been here for 40 years. We want to be around for another 40 years, and the foundation wants to support that. So if you're doing some estate planning and you want to contribute to that after you're, leave a legacy for us, we would really appreciate it. On any of these, if you've got any questions, please come see me. I'm really easy to find. I'm right behind the, front desk. So just come in and talk to me. But one last thing, don't forget, I know we only get like one Amazon package a quarter here at Royal Oaks, yeah. Don't forget to shop AmazonSmile.com. Get your family, get your friends to do that as well. Amazon Smile, every purchase you make, they will donate 0.5% of your total back to the People of Faith Foundation. Doesn't cost you anything. You're just shopping. It's signed up just like you would Amazon. In fact, all Amazon Smile is a sister website of Amazon. Now, I get people all the time going, well, why can't I just go to Amazon and link everything? And Amazon said, if you are that passionate about your charity, then we need to know that, and you will go to a second site that we run to do that. And that way we know you're really serious about it. You just didn't have everybody and their brother sign up to try to get money out of us. We really want you to donate. So shop AmazonSmile.com. Super easy. It doesn't matter whether you're prime, non-prime. You log in exactly the same as you would on your Amazon account. You just go to AmazonSmile.com. And then finally, the fries. Register your, come to you just a minute. Register your Fry's VIP card. That's even easier because anytime you shop at Fry's, they will automatically make a donation if you link your card to the People of Faith Foundation. Super easy. If you got questions on how to do it, come see me. And Valerie, you had a question. Okay. The question was, and especially for the people on the TV cameras, the question was, can you register more than one charity on either one of these? And no, you cannot. It is just one charity, and that's it. So, I understand people will pick something else, and that's fine. I look at it going, as long as you're donating to something, we would love to have it people of faith, but I understand there's other passions out there, and if you're giving to the foundation in other ways, that's great. So, great question. All right, with that, I am going to turn it back over to Carter. So there you go.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, so this is the first time that we've been able to, I'll present some financial results of the foundation later. I've always done that, but I wanted to present some programmatic information about the foundation as well and kind of incorporate that into the annual financial update. So, but for the financial results, let's go ahead and take a look at the last fiscal year. So we start our fiscal year on March 1 and run through the end of February. So the last fiscal year that ended was February 28th, 2022. So first thing I like to look at is basically our balance sheet. So for those of you that were in business or ran a business of your own, this is your assets and liabilities. So I'm just going to group them into big categories, and you'll see why. So on our balance sheet, we've got cash, unrestricted cash and investments. And these are basically cash or our investment portfolio that can be spent for any particular purpose of Royal Oaks operations. We had about $74 million at February 28th. We also had property and equipment, so this includes all the buildings, all the land, all the equipment, everything to basically run the organization of about $128 million. This also does include construction in progress, probably about $50 million or so of construction for building the new part of the campus. So it has current and new campus. Restricted assets. Restricted assets, these are assets that have to be used for a very specific purpose because they're limited either by law or bond indenture or something of that nature. Some external source is putting a restriction on it. Most of the restricted assets are bond-related funds because we have debt, but it has to be spent on the expansion. Or if it's a bond reserve, it has to be held in reserve so long as the bonds are outstanding. Lastly is just all our other assets combined barely come up to $4 million. So you can see why I grouped them into these little buckets. When I say all other assets, inventories, accounts receivable, things of that nature that you're used to as a business. But you can see the vast majority is kind of in, 3 buckets right now. And quite frankly, the restricted assets will keep going down. It'll never be zero, but it'll get to a point where it's really, really low because a lot of that shifts over to property and equipment as we construct the new expansion. So this is the positive side of the balance sheet as far as these are your assets or our assets. Secondly, the next part of the balance sheet is the liabilities. So, okay, well, we have obligations. And in that particular assets, in that particular side of the balance sheet, we have our bonds. We have $130 million of outstanding debt. Certainly, this is prior debt, a Series 2016 debt, where we mostly constructed the Friendship House, but there's even some older debt related with that. Then there's the new debt. There's about $90 million of new bonds related to the construction of the expansion. This number is going to go up and then it's going to come down because we have a second set of debt related to the expansion. It's just split into 2 sets of bonds, an A bond and a B bond. You get the A bond right away and you get all this money and you have to spend it. And then when you're done, you shift over to the B bond, and that's kind of a drawdown loan. But as people move into Inspirata Point, it gets paid off right away. So that one, think of it as it gets drawn down real quick and paid off real quick. So it will move before it finally settles. Deferred entrance fees. So what deferred entrance fees is, everybody here that's a Life Care resident would have paid an entrance fee to Royal Oaks. So we don't take that money and recognize it as revenue right away. We do take it and we put it in our operating reserve so we can earn investment return on it. However, we take the balance of that and we put it as a liability because we have to, it's unearned. We have to perform services in order to earn it. And we provide those services basically over your lifetimes. And so we allocate a portion of those entrance fees over the estimated remaining life of residents. And we do this resident by resident. Construction payable. So this is relatively new and it's specifically related to construction. So we have $8.2 million at 228. So in that one day, that one point of time, we owed various construction liabilities of $8.2 million. Now, half of that is actually the retainage that we owe to the general contractor. So for those of you that have done construction contractors or were in that business, retainage is work that has been performed by the general contractor. So therefore, we owe them the money. However, contractually, we are withholding that until the project is complete and done to our satisfaction. And once it's complete and we sign off saying this has been done, and the architect has actually signed off on it as well, that it has been done to specification, then we release that retainage. But in the meantime, we do have to accrue it. All the other are just current portions of pay applications and things of that nature. All the other liabilities total about $8.7 million. And in there, there's accounts payable, accrued vacation for employees, accrued payroll. There's some of us have refundable contracts versus non-refundable contracts. So the refundable portion of that contract is sitting in that other liabilities. So it's made up of a lot of different things. But again, you can see that among the liabilities, it's kind of really grouped into three big categories and everything else is just kind of other. So generally, when you have your balance sheet, you take your assets, which totaled $250 million, and you take your liabilities, which totaled $195 million, $996 million. Take your assets, you subtract your liabilities, and then you have basically your net worth or your owner's equity. Or in our case, because we're a nonprofit, we call it net assets. Okay? So we had $54 million to the positive. So that's a pretty strong balance sheet from a very high level point of view. So next, the balance sheet tells you what the balances of assets and liabilities were on that one day, February 28th. But what happened during the year? What was the change that occurred? That's the operating report, if you will. And again, if you were in business, you probably call it the P&L report, things of that nature, or revenue and expense. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the revenue and expense of what happened from a financial standpoint during the year. So we're going to start with our operating revenues. And all of this information that you're seeing right here is just for Royal Oaks, okay? So we do have our audited financial statements for February 28, 2022 available. If anybody would like to request a copy, please see accounting. In that report, you have Royal Oaks and the foundation and another entity called Cactus Sky because they're all related together. But when I do this presentation, I'm just showing you Royal Oaks information. So in this particular instance, these are all the operating revenues of Royal Oaks. So monthly service fees, this is monthly service fees for people that are in independent living, $14.6 million. And then we move down to revenue from healthcare services. So monthly service fees from people that are in healthcare services, that means they're permanently in assisted living, whichever level, that ended up being about $3.7 million, okay? So all the life care residents, $14.6 million, $3.7 million. So just over $18 million just in monthly service fees from life care residents alone, okay? We do get another $1.7 million in community resident service fees. So community residents in assisted living, we have rooms available. And what we generally do is we sell this capacity to the outside. There are plenty of people out there that don't have life care but do need these services tremendously. And so we sell them to them at market rate. I think the market rate for the Friendship House is around $7,500, $7,600 a month, and for the care center, it's like $7,800 a month. I know that sounds very expensive, but it's right in the middle of what some assisted livings charge. And so we get about $1.7 million from those residents that are willing to come in here and pay that market rate in our assisted living. Meal per diem. In assisted living, we do have to provide extra meals. So in your monthly service fee, when you're in independent living, we provide one meal a day. You recognize that as your dining dollars. That's in your contract. When you go to assisted living, we are required by state regulation to provide additional meals, and there's a fee for those additional meals. That totaled about $700,000. And then various supplies and other minor services that are not covered by contract. So for example, most of that's really medical supplies, about $61,000. So medical supplies, we just basically provide them to you. We have a medical supply inventory. We just pass the cost on. That's all it is. We don't really make any money on that. We're just paying, passing the cost on for those. All the other revenues are all the other ancillary services. When you have guest meals, when you pay transfer fees to transfer from one unit to another, telephone. When we were offering telephone, I know we've been switched off of that. Internet, we were offering internet back then. I know we've kind of eliminated that particular fee. But all those little ancillary services are wrapped up into that number. The primary bulk of that is mostly additional dining services. So all told, operating revenues, $22.3 million. And for the most part, you can look at really every one of these, and every one of these is coming from the residents in some form of another, whether it's from a contract with the monthly service fees or for something additional beyond the contract, because there's some ancillary services that we're offering that you would like to take advantage of. So let's take a look at the expenses. So these are just the operating expenses. In other words, what does it take to provide the services to the residents? Well, clearly at the top, you have salaries and wages. So this is part of the cost of labor, $13.3 million for all the staff for the last fiscal year. Okay, but that's just their wages that we paid them. And that includes hours that they worked, and of course, if they called in sick or had vacation, that's what it includes all of that. Employee benefits and taxes, which is another cost of labor. Okay, so we do provide them health insurance and dental insurance. And unfortunately, Uncle Sam keeps saying we have to keep paying taxes too. So, we have to kind of comply with that. So that's another $3 million on top of that. So we're already at $16.3 million out of $24.3 million total. So the vast, vast majority is people, which makes sense. It is a service industry. It's a people-driven industry. Then we get into some other things. Medical supplies and drugs, $128,000. I know that doesn't quite agree to the $61,000 because there are some things that we just have the cost for. Like, a lot of the PPE things that we wear as far as gloves, gowns, things of that nature, that's a cost of operation to us. We don't generally pass those along. We pass along the things that are specifically used by residents. So that's why there's not a complete match between that $61,000 and that $128,000. Professional and contracted services, $1.9 million. I mean, that could be attorneys, that could be accountants, that could be payroll processing services. Anytime we use a third party to basically perform a particular function or a consulting to help us out, because that's basically professional and contracted services. Let me give you another example, Mission Linen. We could do all that healthcare laundry in-house, but we ran an analysis and Mission Linen can actually do much bigger volume, much more efficiently. And so we were able to basically take our employees and utilize them in other areas, and they were able to do that for us. So that's also included in professional contracted services. So hold on just a moment. We have one question. Can you give her the microphone? Give it a minute to turn on. There it goes.
Carter, if we were down so many employees
Yes.
and we had to stop a lot of our parties and entertainment here, did that help us or hurt us throughout last year?
So yeah, when we were down employees, did that help us or hurt us? And the answer is both. And let me tell you why. If you just said from a financial numbers, it helped us. In fact, I had a phone call with somebody that reviews our financials annually. And they said, wow, your expenses didn't increase. How did you do that? And I'm like, we were down like 60 positions. It's not like it was all hunky-dory because there's a negative side to that. Yes, there's a financial benefit, but there's a negative side, not the least of which is there's a little bit of a quality of life adjustment that you had to make because you didn't have to have those parties. You had to have a buffet in the Oak Room and things of that nature. But don't forget the staff. The staff got stretched thin. We asked for a lot of overtime that a lot of people were willing to pick up, and we were starting to get worried about burnout. When an employee works 30 straight days, they're not taking a weekend off, they're not taking a holiday off, and they're working a lot of overtime, we get concerned. Yeah, they're making money, and that's an advantage to them, but how long can they keep that up? And so there are positive and negatives to that. But from a purely financial number standpoint, did it benefit us? yes, that expense is not as high as it would have been had all the positions been filled, or even if we were just at normal staffing levels. Continuing on, property and equipment services, $1.1 million. This includes anybody that comes and helps us do PM, preventative maintenance or repairs, and all the various supplies that we use throughout the campus to basically keep this place humming, whatever it is, air filters, going in and making some repairs to plumbing, things of that nature, pest control, they add up over time. Food, this is just raw food. This is just raw food. This is just, poultry, meat, fish, vegetables, spices, whatever. It's just raw food coming in the door, $1.7 million. Utilities, $1.3 million. We're doing a great job, actually, with utilities. We've had a lot of projects over the last few years that really help us run a lot of things a lot more efficiently from the aspect of both electricity and water. Natural gas we do have, but we don't use a ton of it, so we make improvements where we are. Excuse me, we make improvements where we can, but the bulk of efficiency is definitely seen in electricity and water. All other expenses, about $1.6 million. So expenses to provide services to residents, about $24 million. So $22.3 million that came in from residents, $24.3 million that went out related to providing services to residents. There's a deficit there of just about $2 million, $1.9 million. Now, generally speaking, if you run a business this way, you can't stay in business for very long, yet we've been here for 40 years doing this. And why is that? And the reason for that is there is a little bit of a subsidy that comes in from investment returns that help the operations, okay? So we have operations at a deficit of about $1.9 million, $2 million. We do have interest on our long-term debt that we do have to pay right now, which is $1.2 million. That will go up over time. Right now, we're not counting the debt payments on the new expansion because that's still funded from bond proceeds at the moment until construction is completed and we're at least 6 months into fill up. So that number will start to increase. However, when that starts to increase, new Inspirata Point people will be moving in, and so the revenues will increase on the same side. So that's how those generally will work. So now we've got our net operating margin plus interest on our debt of about $3.1 million. So it's cash flow going out of about $3.1 million. Okay, so what else do we have coming in that really helps that? Well, we actually do get interest and dividends. We got about $1.2, $1.3 million on interest and dividends that came in from our investments. We also have realized gains of $2.7 million. So a realized gain on an investment is something that has been captured. So if you buy an investment for $100 and you sell an investment for $120, you have a realized gain of $120 because you've sold it, you've captured it, you have that money. An unrealized gain is different. I bought something for $100, and right now I'm still holding it as an investment, and it's worth $120. Well, I have a gain, but it's unrealized. I haven't captured it. It could change in 5 minutes. It could change tomorrow. Investment expenses. So we do have a lot of our portfolio that's actively managed, so we do have to pay our investment manager, so about $370,000 this year. We did have a transfer from the foundation of about $622,000 because they helped with a lot of the things that Chuck had mentioned. They helped with art and various other purchases around Royal Oaks, the lifts and things of that nature. So there was a big campaign last year from the foundation to say, we would like to help Royal Oaks out with various projects, and that resulted in them transferring about $622,000 to help with those particular projects. You'll probably see another transfer from the foundation in the future related to the Vita Center. So the Vita Center was not under construction when these numbers occurred, but it is now. So there are restricted donations in the foundation that the foundation has pledged to help for the Vita Center, so you will see significant numbers of transfers from the foundation to the Royal Oaks to help with the Vita Center next year. Lastly is a transfer to Cactus Sky of about $750,000. This is from Royal Oaks to Cactus Sky. Cactus Sky is an LLC company. Royal Oaks is its sole member. It's really there for potential future growth, and this is just an amount that's transferred. This amount is discretionary. I usually go to the finance committee and or the board or both, and just say, hey, let's transfer this over there for future growth. And then that way, that company has the ability to investigate, if there's any sort of land purchases available or anything of that nature, and do various due diligence on those without interrupting the operations of Royal Oaks. It can just go out and do it on its own. So now we take all of that, we start with the negative 3.1 million. After we have all these, we're actually on the positive side of about $300,000. So we had about a positive cash flow about $300,000, okay? However, as most of you know that run any sort of business or have been part of business in your career, there are things that, accounting makes you do, because it just is. The accounting rules say we have to do it. And basically, these are what I call the non-cash adjustments, okay? So you have earned entrance fees. Remember I talked about earned entrance fees. You pay them and then we recognize them over time. So even though I'm recognizing $6.6 million of earned entrance fee revenue, the reality is the bulk of those entrance fees were paid in prior years. I've already had the cash for years. I just have to allocate a portion of revenue over time. So it's really not a cash revenue. Unrealized gain and loss on investments. We already kind of talked about that. That's just the change in the value of the investments that we're continuing to hold. Depreciation, a lot of you should be familiar with that. I buy an asset, I use it to provide services like this auditorium and various buildings, and I use it over time. I have to allocate that cost over time, even though I paid for it a long, long time ago. And then we do have marketing for expansion of about $1.4 million. That will continue in the next year, and eventually that number will start going down as that gets incorporated into Royal Oaks operations. Because right now it's still an expansion, but eventually it'll switch from expansion to operations. So our total net income or loss for the year, just about break even, just under $40,000 on the positive side. And that's pretty much what a nonprofit will do. Sometimes it'll be up, sometimes it'll be down, sometimes it'll be right close to even. Okay. We do have debt covenants in association with the bonds. Our debt covenants we have two financial covenants that we have to maintain. We have to maintain 120 days cash on hand, and we have to have what's called a 1.2 debt service coverage ratio. So 120 days, now first of all, the bond indentures indicate how these numbers are to be calculated. But in a nutshell, this is what it means. Days cash on hand basically says, if you turned off your revenue spigot, you had absolutely no revenue from any source coming in, how long could your organization exist based on its average daily spending? We want you to keep at least 120 days. The debt service coverage is the same thing. If we calculate your annual debt service requirements, principal and interest, can you pay them at least 1.2 times? And in our particular case, for the fiscal year ended 22, we have 1,044 days cash on hand at February 28th, and we had a 3.25 debt service coverage ratio. So we could pay our debt 3 times, and we had 1,000 days cash on hand, which is just over 3 years. Now, I will tell you, if you ask me what's our days cash on hand right now, it's less. And all you have to do is look at the S&P 500 to determine that. Because we do have a portfolio, and it is an aggressive portfolio. It's about 75, almost 80% stocks. And so if you look at the S&P, it'll kind of follow the S&P. Not completely, because we do have some divestment, don't get me wrong. But if you're sitting there telling me the S&P is down 15, 17%, there's a good chance our portfolio is probably down that much as well. So let's look at the foundation's financials. So all of that information was related to Royal Oaks. So now let's look at the foundation's financials. Again, same time period. So we're going to start off with their balance sheet. They had total assets of about $31.3 million. Darn near all of that was investments. Okay, they have restricted and unrestricted investments, but it's all investments. Okay, they had total liabilities of about $2.2 million. Almost all of that are what are called gift annuity contract liabilities. So when you do a gift annuity, you're basically giving a gift to the foundation, but as part of that, it is a contract by the foundation to pay back to the donor a certain interest every year. It's paid out quarterly, and we have to calculate the estimated payout of all of those contracts and then discount them to present value. In other words, if you give me a contract and I estimate it's going to take 10 years to pay out that contract, if I take all those payments over the next 10 years, and then I said, for that stream of payments, what is that money worth today in today's dollars? Well, for all those contracts, they're worth about $2.2 million. And then, of course, the net assets, take the assets, subtract the liabilities, they have $29 million in assets at the end of the fiscal year last year. Now, as I said, they have restricted and unrestricted because they have a lot. The foundation is the philanthropic arm of the organization as a whole, and it has donor restrictions. So a lot of donors will say, I would like this restricted for a particular purpose. And when they do that, the foundation, in order to accept the gift, they have to accept the restriction with the gift. Now, the vast majority of donations that we get are unrestricted, and that's fantastic. Some that we get that are restricted, and we're willing to accept that restriction. So at the end of last year, we had $5.8 million in restricted net assets. In other words, we have to meet the donors restricted. It's restricted for capital improvement. It's restricted for the chapel. It's restricted for scholarship. Whatever it's restricted for, we have to spend it for that particular purpose. Everything else is unrestricted, $23.2 million. And so, and this language is very specific. Net assets with donor restrictions. Okay, so this is only donor restrictions. You'll note, if you remember, I had restricted assets back in Royal Oaks, and that's the difference between maybe a legal type of restriction versus a donor restriction. A donor restriction, we have to hold it as part of our net assets until it's spent accordingly. With a restricted, when it's restricted by somebody outside other than a donor, we just show that on the balance sheet as a restricted asset of some kind. So what were their changes? They had contribution revenue of about $858,000. And they had program revenue, they had program expenses about $1.9 million. Now, certainly they had other things. They had investment returns and other administrative expenses, but these are the big parts of the revenue and expense. And within that program, resident subsidies, $580,000. So this resident subsidies includes the individual subsidies from the benevolent program that Chuck talked about earlier. It also includes, for those that are eligible, the 3% subsidy, for those that are eligible, the longevity subsidy, and for those that are eligible, the health services subsidy. So all those type of subsidies / stipends or whatnot are all rolled up into that. The employee appreciation last year distributed $591,000 from the foundation. So I want to say a good portion of that, almost $450,000, maybe a little bit more, came from donations from the residents. The remainder came from an unrestricted portion from the foundation. Transfer to Royal Oaks for capital projects, we already kind of talked about that, $622,000. And that is a program expense to the foundation. So we talked about all the financials and the results of both Royal Oaks and the foundation. And now I want to take a look ahead at a couple things that are going to impact us this year, that are either already impacting us or they'll come shortly thereafter. Now, certainly this topic, I covered it last year. I know it's not the greatest topic. We're all feeling it. But I want to show you the numbers, okay? Some of you have been hearing the numbers. Some of you have been seeing the numbers. But I'm going to put it up here so that we're all on the same page, okay? And I pulled all of this information from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, okay? And it's the most recent report I could get, which I think August was available. I don't think September's was available yet at the time I put this together. So, goods and services, inflation on goods and services. Anybody remember what that number was, the last one that was reported? 8.5, close, 8.3%. 8.3% for year over year as of August 31. The average over the last 20 years, including this 8.3%, by the way, and all the previous ones that were like 7 or 8, the average over the last 20 years is 2.39. It has been 5% or more since May of 2021, the 12-month rolling average. Since May of 2021, the inflation rate in the United States, all goods and services, has been 5% or more. Prior to May of 2021, in the last 20 years, the last time it got that high was July of 2008, 5.6. So, when I dig into that, what are some things that could hit Royal Oaks potentially? So, food costs 11.4%. I'm sure if you go to the grocery store, you're seeing that. I grant you this is a national average. It's different locales are different, and some things within food are different. Like beef is probably up like 30 or 40% alone. Thankfully, we do have great buying power through Morrison Living, which is a part of Compass, which is a global organization that basically helps protect our food chain, but we are not immune from this. There are some products that we are seeing an 11% or more increase on, and there's some products that the buying power has been helping us and we've been able to get it for less than that. But have we been seeing 11% increases on some food? Yes, we have. Utility services up 20%. Now, this one I will say, we're not sitting at this 20%. Okay? Arizona's doing much, much better than 20%. Okay? What's driving this one up on a national average is probably the Northeast. The Northeast has a lot of oil to heat homes and things of that nature, so there's a lot of crude prices that are driving that up. When you get out to here, we have some hydroelectric power and we have some nuclear power. In fact, nuclear power is the biggest source here. That's actually helping us keep it relatively stable. Costs are going up. I'm not saying they're not. But I haven't seen, I will say water is definitely the one that's climbing the most right now, which doesn't surprise me. We live in a desert and the Colorado River is down quite a bit. But I will say we haven't quite hit that 19.8%. And so far, that's probably the only one up here that I would probably disagree with. I'm not saying that the U.S. Bureau is wrong. I'm just saying here in Arizona, we may not be seeing that. We're seeing an increase, but it's not that high. Commodities excluding food and energy, so these would be all the supplies that we buy, particularly for facilities or whatnot, 7.1%. I got to be honest, that one's pretty accurate. We're seeing that a lot in Arizona and California. I know we're not in California, but the Southwest and the western part of the United States, we're actually running a little bit higher than that. Medical commodities, this is our medical supplies, which isn't a real big portion of our budget, but that alone is 4.1%. And again, I would agree with that. That's pretty consistent from what I'm seeing. So here's a graphic representation of what I talked about, particularly that 8.3%. This is what the inflation has done over the last 20 years, okay? So you can see, I know it might be a little hard for some. This is the bottom, negative 5%, 0, 5%, 10%. The line is kind of right in here between 0 and 5, 2.5, okay? A little bit above, spiked up. There's that one I talked about, 5.6%, then came right back down. We actually had deflation. It was right here in 2008, 2009. We all remember that. And then it just kind of little volatile, and then we get the hockey stick right here. Now, I'm going to ask this question, and I will say, if I asked this of our staff, I don't think I would get near as big of a response. How many of you remember and lived through the 70s? Yeah. Okay. I was 5 years old in 1979. Okay, I didn't run the household, but you know what? I was old enough to understand the feel of it. I saw my parents tighten their belt, okay? I didn't have to deal with the stresses that they did. I will say, right now, this is looking like the 70s, the late 70s. And right now, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I'm not seeing anything that differentiates this from the 70s. And I know this is my opinion only, and it's a little bit of a gloomy one. but we had big inflation for a big 4, almost 5-year period before we were able to kind of get it back to what we would consider normal, okay? I was reading an article just the other day. OPEC actually cut production. It's not a full-on oil embargo like it was in the 70s, but that's going to have an impact. I'd love to say this is going to last maybe another year, maybe 2 at the most. But right now, when I look at this and I look at the relatively same circumstances in the 70s, we're still there. So there's nothing that leads me to believe this is going to be different yet. We are a little bit of a different economy. We're more service-driven instead of manufacturer-driven. I'll grant you that. There's different circumstances. That was 50 some odd years ago. I grant you that. But when you look at some of these economic models, it's like the 70s again. Talking a little bit about more inflation. So we kind of looked on the commodity side, but remember, what's most of our operating expenses? It's labor costs, wages in particular. So private industry is up 5 point. Now this information was as of June 2022, because they do it quarterly. So I haven't seen the last quarter yet. So I only have these through June of 2022. Private industry is up 5.5%. That's pretty consistent. We gave our employees like around 4% in March. Everybody. So it's still a little high, it's running a little higher than what we were able to do. Average of the last 15 years, 2.51%, even with that 5.5% included. So obviously, this is a 15-year high. This last one that was just released, 5.5%. I suspect the next number to come out will be the new 15-year high. I don't think it's slowing down yet on the wage scale yet. But you'll notice something. What was the inflation? What was the inflation number? It was like 8.3, 8.5. And what's this? 5.5? So people are what? People that are still working are losing money. So that's why I think this is going to stay at new highs until we can flip it. If we can keep bringing inflation down, until that inflation line crosses this one, I don't see this one breaking yet. So let's look at the last few quarters. March of 2022, the one before this was 4.8. Before that one, 4.4. Before that one, 4.1. I mean, so that was a new 15-year high. Before that, that was the 15-year high. Before that, that was the 15-year. You're getting the pattern here. So I have to go. So prior to September 22, again, March 2008, 3.2% wage growth was the highest in the last 15 years. So you can clearly see that the last, since May-ish of 2021, is really when things started to kick in. This one was a little bit of a lagging indicator because wages came. So the inflation kind of started to go first, and then wages lagged behind it, which is why I think this is a lagging indicator. If inflation starts to come down, this comes down at a later point. Expected to impact Royal Oak. So let's look, and again, they let you break it down by industry because that's everything. Breaking it down by industry, leisure and hospitality, 7.8%, healthcare and social services, 5.7%. These are nationwide. So I will tell you, California, both of these numbers are double digits, over 10. Arizona's not there. I don't think Arizona is about 7.8%. I do think Arizona is pretty close to that one, though. So these are the things that I'm working with, okay? I don't take these as gospel. I use these as a tool. I also have to look at what's going on in our local locale. But I want you to know what I'm looking at, so we're all on the same page. So, before I get into the expansion update, the reason I bring up the inflation is because I get it every year. what's the monthly service fee increase? The answer right now is I don't know. I have to look at what is our internal rate of inflation for Royal Oaks for the last year, and what do I project it to be going forward? And I have to base my projections on some statistical data that I have available to me. And I evaluate that data as to whether it's good or not. Because you could see when we talked about utilities, yeah, 19%, but in Arizona, I'm not buying that. So, I mean, even then, I'm still trying to do a little bit of my own research to help my forecast. So I'm still coming up with what that monthly service fee is, and I don't know the answer to that question yet. But I can tell you, this is what I'm looking at. Expansion. So we started our Inspirata Point in December of 2020. We got the villas open in April of 2022. They were about a couple months behind. Last year, this said February. And then everything else also got pushed out a little bit. The 3-story apartment, January and February of 2023 is what we're expecting. Okay, it hasn't been nailed down. I don't have a firm date yet. Culinary building to go along with that 3-story, January, February of 2023 as well. And then the final phase, the 4-story building, May of June of 2023. Right now I'm putting ranges because that's all I have. There's just been quite a bit of extended timelines related to purchasing things. There are a lot of things, give me one second, but we'll get a question over there. There are a lot of things that had long lead times. They said 10 weeks, so we ordered them a long time ago. And then we're getting close to delivery. Oh, we need 4 or 6 more weeks. And I'm like, we tried to prepare, and they still pulled the rug out from under us. So you have a question over here?
It seemed like our timing was good for our construction, because when we set up this construction, we weren't hit by these inflation prices. Did that help us, or does Sun still charge you the inflated prices?
So Sun doesn't charge us the inflated prices. There are only about there's 3 exceptions, and what I say by that is, in any general contractor, they will create an allowance for commodities like lumber, steel, and glass to help handle inflation. So an allowance is not locked in. Everything else is locked in. So if, for example, if we had some cast iron pipes over there and they went up, I'm like, well, that was locked in. The subs locked that in, okay? But the lumber and the steel and the glass, generally those commodities, they can't lock in. And it just has to do with, it depends on what the supply is at the time. So we estimate an allowance. So on those 3, we did have escalation costs that did exceed the allowance. So we put in a $2 million allowance for lumber escalation, and it came in at 2.5. So we did have a little bit over there. We are formulating the steel right now, and we're formulating the glass. They call it glazing. The glazing, I think, is going to come within the allowance. I think we're going to be okay there. The steel might be a smidge over. I think we had an allowance for 100K, and it might come in a little bit over 100K. So I think we did relatively okay. And even though the lumber sounds like a lot, at one point the lumber escalation was almost $5 million, and we said no, we're not doing that. And we basically waited and waited and waited and waited for the price to come down, and it finally came down, and we were able to get it for 2.5 escalation. So. But I will tell you, the timing was right. I agree with you, because we're past all this point now. We have all our commodities. We got them a while ago. The only thing we're waiting is the catch up of a little bit of the escalation. But yeah, as far as if a subcontractor comes and says, well, my labor increased more than I thought, it's like, well, that's the general contractor's problem, quite frankly. And I don't mean to be crass, but that's what a general contractor is there for. It's like you negotiated the contract with the sub, so that means that that's between you and the sub. The only things that are allowed are things that were commodity allowances that were specifically indicated as commodity allowances in the contract. And quite frankly, Sunt does a great job with their subs. So I'm sure they have disagreements with their subs, but they've handled it professionally. Okay. I do want to also get into the restaurant remodel that we are planning next year. So it's not in the year that we're in right now, but the year after that. So we'll be talking about it. For those of you that may have gone to your area meetings, you've probably heard Kendra talk about this. If you haven't been to your area meeting yet, I highly, 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 highly encourage you to go, because she's going to talk about the remodel of our existing restaurants. And she's got pictures, and I think you'll be pretty excited about it, quite frankly. So I'm just going to give you a very, very high level, and then, like I said, go to your area meeting and you'll get some more details. So this is going to be for all the central restaurants, okay? So that's going to be the Oak Room, the grill, the pub, and even that little convenience area that's by the grill, okay? All of that hallway is going to be renovated. So basically from the lobby all the way down through the pub, okay? We're going to do this in a phased approach, though. We're not going to, because we'll have to close them off, but we're not going to close them off all at once. We're going to do this in a phased approach. We'll close one and then do another. We're actually going to add a coffee bar in a particular location. So we're going to try to add something new that we don't have right now. Okay? As I mentioned before, we'll do it in a phased approach. This is probably going to take us about a year to complete it. Okay? For more information, like I said, I would definitely go to your area meeting, and they can tell you a lot more about, like, well, what are the new venues going to look like? What type of menus are they going to offer? Things of that nature. That type of information is going to be at the area meeting, but I at least wanted to introduce the topic right here in that, because it will have a financial impact from the aspect of when I'm looking at putting together the capital budget for next year, what are we going to spend on as far as improvements? This is going to be the vast bulk of that capital budget for next year. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions from anybody about anything that we've discussed here or anything else that you would like. So, yes, right here. Hold on, let's wait for the microphone here. Holly's got one.
Good morning, and thank you for the information. Question regarding the employees. Everybody's having a hard time finding employees.
Yes.
And so are you at your staff norm at this point?
I would say yes, we're at our staff norm. At the height of our open positions, we had 60 open positions. We've got it down to about 20 to 30, which is normal. I mean, in any particular business, you are going to have a certain level of turnover. So if we normally have about 350 employees and we have about 20, that's less than 10% of our staff that's turned over.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Well, then I'm guessing I did one heck of a job. You don't even have any questions, for goodness gracious. All right. Well, before you go, did you all enjoy the foundation presentation that Chuck gave? Yes? Good. So keep that in there. You like it? All right. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for those on the television that tuned in. Like I said, we've recorded this one. We'll get it up on YouTube. If something comes up and you think about a question, certainly you know where to find me. I'm in the front office. A hard copy of this presentation is available from Holly or Gail in the back, or if you're watching on TV, they will be available in that magazine rack where we keep all the other kind of informational packets over by the grill. All right? Thank you. Mm-hmm.